Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Brian and I are hopefully on camera. Hopefully you can see us. We're going to take turns talking throughout the presentation. Yeah, maximizing team effectiveness. And so I'm not sure. I know a lot of you are already working from home. That's probably a good thing. And then there's maybe some other folks that are on the fence, or you've got team members that haven't been able to move out of the office yet. We're going to try to cover a lot, and we're going to try to keep it under 30 minutes and maybe leave some time at the end for some questions. So with that, I'm just going to dive right in and we're going to get started. So my name's Adam. I've worked in HR for a lot of big companies for 15 years. And believe it or not, a lot of those years were working remote in one way or another. At a very bare minimum, you can't be in 15 or 30 locations at the same time. So I'm used to managing what I consider to be distributed teams. But in terms of having employees that work from home, I've had my fair share of them too, and they present some interesting issues. So I bring a perspective from that angle. Brian?
Yeah. Hey, and I'm Brian Formato, and those of you that know me probably recognize that first slide, that picture of the beach. The beach is my happy place. I run Groove Management, a human capital consulting firm, and also a separate company called Leader Surf, which takes leaders to Costa Rica and teaches them how to surf and how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so these are some uncomfortable times. So we're pushing everybody out of our comfort zones as we go through this together. And so we hope that we're going to share some informative information today, and we're here to then be a resource to you and your organizations as we navigate these uncharted waters.
Yeah, so this is obviously a timely subject. We did our first iteration of this last week, and we had some pretty good attendance, but we've got a lot more attendance today. So I think that it's pretty obvious that things have changed pretty rapidly. I was on TV last week twice, providing some expert opinions on how to handle working from home, but managing employees that are working from home, and then also how do you set up your own space. And you're going to get a lot more elaborate content on that same subject today.
Yeah, and just this morning, I'm not a morning TV person, but I had the Today Show on. I thought it was interesting to see that the Today Show even went virtual. So Al Roker was doing the weather on his iPhone from home, and Susanna, I'm not even sure. Guthrie, she was at home feeling ill and in her basement on video, and Hoda was in the studio. So, companies, people, we're all making our way through this new world and figuring out how to navigate using technology to solve problems. And so the fact you're on this call shows that you figured out the webinar thus far. And so we hope to give you some more tips along these lines. So, to get started, there's a way to turn this threat into an opportunity to try some new things. And so first thing I want to do is I got my wipes. I want to make certain that we're sanitary here. So I'm going to wipe down the screen a little bit, make certain that we're all being safe and doing our social distancing as we go through this. All joking aside, though, this, honestly, what we're going through right now is what I would consider the largest social experiment of any of our lifetimes. We are clearly in uncharted territory. Nobody's been through this before, but we're all in it together. And so this is changing the way we live, work, and interact with each other, with our families, and with our work. And so really what we need to do is we just need to take it day by day. I think the key word is patience. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But one of the things that I've found in a lot of the work that I do is around change and change management. And I find that people's quick knee-jerk reaction to anything new tends to be no. And what we're asking at this time is to change your frame and to start thinking, instead of saying no, say why not. And so as an example, I worked with a recruiting firm for several years, and one of the things that they were absolutely reluctant to do was video interviewing. And all of a sudden now, they're giving out advice on how to effectively video interview, and as a candidate, how to conduct a video interview. And so this pivot is happening real time, and it's out of necessity, but I think it's going to make us all more agile and more adept at working in this new world order.
And if we're completely honest with ourselves, I think most of the people on this call have done some work from home, right? So it's possible. And there was surveys that were done. The most recent stuff that I could find was from 2017. But a number of different surveys basically say that 1 in 3, up to 40% of people are capable of working from home, and a lot of times already have. It's just a matter of having the right tools and resources. So we know that it's doable. And if we are lowering our apprehension about giving it a shot, it's a new opportunity that we can take advantage of. So flexible work arrangements are something that really help increase employee engagement. And it's also something that once people get a taste for it, they really don't want to go back. So what the data shows is that 22% of people that have an opportunity to either at least flex their hours, work alternative schedules, or work from home, are much more likely to be happy, engaged, and also 80% more likely never to take another job where they're having to work 9 to 5 in a physical space every single day. So this is the future, and whether we like it or not, now we have an opportunity to adapt.
Yeah. So if your team is going remote, the idea is not to be a remote controller, meaning that you're trying to push buttons and get people to do what you want them to. You have to use this as an opportunity to empower. I always joke with people about the fact that I bet that everybody on this call knows what kind of car their boss drives. And why do they know that? Because they want to know when their boss is at work and when their boss is left for the day. Whether they got in before them or after them. And so the idea here is that if you're managing people, you've got to empower them. That means drive accountability for the tasks at hand, but not for the face time. Those people that micromanage and manage people by the clock are not going to succeed in managing people in a virtual environment. So you have to give people the latitude and the flexibility, but at the same time, you have to hold them accountable. And we'll talk through a few techniques for driving accountability. Several years ago when I was working at Ingersoll Rand, we had this monthly meeting with 25 people, of which 10 were virtual and the other 15 sat in a room to hold the meeting. And what we found was one day there was a snowstorm and it forced us all to go virtual and be on the call and use a webcast like this. What we found was the feedback was that that was the best meeting we ever had. And the reason that it was the best meeting was that it leveled the playing field. There weren't sidebar conversations and so forth. So by putting everybody virtual and being on this level playing field, there are ways that this can actually enhance communication, collaboration, and teamwork. And so once again, back to the why not, seek the opportunity in this.
So with opportunities come challenges, right? So let's talk about what some of those challenges might be. The first of which is definitely, let's just put it out there, it's going to be more difficult to communicate with everybody. Nothing beats being able to walk down the hall and have a face-to-face interaction with either your own employee or a coworker, someone in another department. Or another thing that we all take for granted, I think, when we work in an office is you've got the inter-office telephone. You just pick it up and you dial a 3-digit extension in most cases, and you've got somebody across the building or across the company in another office entirely, within seconds. And that's going to be delayed, right? So that's just something that we have to accept, but also take into consideration and find some alternatives. And we're going to talk about those in a minute, so I'm not going to elaborate right now, but those are challenges that we're going to try to help you overcome. Another thing that you have to take into mind is that there's going to be different distractions, okay? So here's the thing about working from home. Yeah, there's all kinds of things. There's, chores that you see when you're sitting there, like I am in my kitchen. If I got up, I'm sure there's something that needs to get done in the kitchen. If you've got kids at home or your spouse, all sorts of things that can distract you from being able to get your job done. But if we're honest with ourselves, we have tons of distractions in an office environment as well, right? So in the picture here, we've got a water cooler, but you and I both know that throughout the day, you're interrupted constantly, and there's no shortage of things that are distracting you from being able to get, your work done throughout the day. So they're just different, and just recognizing that there's going to be adjustment period. So with that being said, you can try to circumvent a lot of this with some planning. Okay, so from a communication standpoint and just a productivity standpoint, you might have a laptop, you might have a cell phone, but does everybody on your team have the tools and resources they need to be able to effectively do their own jobs? And that might be a challenge. And unfortunately, here we are, we did our first presentation a week ago. We were talking to people about trying to get ahead of it. And in a lot of cases, depending on the state where, the city that you're in right now, you may already find yourself in a situation where people are already home. So I apologize if this is a little bit late, but the things to consider are the phone and internet. So internet in particular, not everybody has equal access to internet access at their home. So that's something that might come up. Obviously, there's different things that you can do from a company standpoint to help support people with that, or take advantage of folks that have unlimited plans on their cell phone. But I wouldn't be surprised that if your employees were asking for reimbursement on those fronts. So those are things that you have to keep in mind, and work with maybe HR and IT to make sure that everybody's got the full level of support that they need in order to be able to work from home. And an IT standpoint, another thing that came up last week, and Brian and I talked about it, is that you may have a VPN, you may have ways for people to dial in, you may have ways to forward calls off those desk phones to cell phones. But there may be limitations. You may have a licensing agreement where you can only have so many users logged in at a time, or alternatively, you might have a great licensing agreement. You can have an unlimited number of users, but the bandwidth just isn't there. So that's something you absolutely need to work with IT just to make sure that everybody has everything. And let's be honest, if we're in a situation now where you've already sent people home, you may be running into this issue soon. So it's something to consider, if it hasn't already become an issue, to check with your tech department to make sure that everything's in order.
Yeah, two things that I'll just add to this. I mean, one is I called Spectrum, our internet provider, and I bumped up the bandwidth, knowing that both myself and my wife are going to be working from home and doing a lot of video calls. We went from 200 gigabytes to 400, and so giving more bandwidth, that was kind of a proactive thing we could do. We started off last week trying to work in our home office, which we shared, and we found that we were crossing paths way too much. And so as of now, we have made another room in our house. Fortunately, we have the space, so we each have our own home office now, and that seemed to work well. The other thing that I've been told by one of my clients was that on the VPN side, one of the bottlenecks with VPNs is actually everybody trying to dial in at the same time. It's like everybody has to enter through the same door, but once you're in, then the bandwidth is actually okay. And so something to think about is, in certain companies, they recommend leaving the computer on the VPN at all times, not shutting down even at night, because the issue is that if everybody tries to get in at the same time the next day, that's an issue. So something to think about. The other thing, last week we talked about sending people home for a day, and some companies had done a trial run. At this point, I would look at a trial run as being something a little bit different. If you've been doing meetings online already with your team, but you want to up the ante and say, hey, we want to add video and we want to do video meetings as a team, rather than taking a meeting where you have a specific topic you have to cover to do a trial run of using video, what I would recommend instead is that you actually hold a specific meeting that is just to work out the kinks on having a video meeting. Ask everybody to dial in. Everybody can do a quick little home tour of their space and how it works, and you can troubleshoot the video and audio issues, not wasting time doing that on a topic meeting where you have to get through something work related. So just kind of a tip to maybe set up a meeting in the next day or so to test the video and audio capabilities online. The other is really around setting ground rules, right? So it's kind of the way that you work in the office and the way you're going to work online and at home is going to be very different. And so I think it's important to establish what are the working hours. In fact, people will probably end up working more hours. You lose the commute time. You can wake up and go straight to your desk. And so what are the hours you're expected to be there? Are you using a tool like a chat program that shows online, with a green bubble to show presence? It's important for you as a manager to know when your people are on or not. What are the communication protocols? You would expect people to be more responsive because they're not out doing other things. They are at work, but at their home office and at their desk. One thing important that I've already seen some issues with companies doing is you schedule a meeting and people don't show up. There should be absolutely no excuse for not showing up for a meeting. You can't say I got caught in traffic or something else happened when in fact you're just working from home. So I think I would set very clear parameters on what the expectations are and potentially work with your HR department to determine whether you need to alter or create a new set of policies for the company during this strange kind of period. The other is around etiquette, right? Adam and I look pretty professional and clean cut as we get on this call, but everyone will remember the BBC newscast with the guy with the kid in the background. That's going to happen, but the picture of the person here in their pajamas, suit and tie at the top, the idea here is that you may be talking to customers, you may be in meetings with lots of different people. you want to look and act professionally, and getting people to take video calls from bed in their pajamas is not ideal. I think each person should get up each day, go to their workspace, prepared to work, dressed for work. You can relax the dress code a little bit, but hygiene is going to be important. You want people to do that. And in terms of eating and drinking and gum chewing and so forth, I would limit all of that. In terms of pets and kids, an occasional pet or kid is going to float by, and we just have to say, hey, this is great, and bring your pet to work day. Every day is a bring your pet to work day when you're working from home. So I think that's cool. But at the same time, the mute button can be your friend, right? And so if you're on a call with lots of people, use the mute button wisely. And when it's not your turn to talk, potentially click on the mute key.
Yeah, all those are all good tips. I think that there's also going to be an adjustment period. Hopefully nobody really goes beyond the pale when it comes to violating some of those ground rules and etiquette ideas. But I think that you made a good point with being understanding when people have other, family members and pets and things like that are going to happen. So here's the thing. We are all really used to going to tons and tons of meetings. At one point I had a position and I did an audit, and I was in meetings for 25 hours a week. So you may want to consider right now that a lot of those meetings could be put on pause, and if they can't, then maybe they need to be rescheduled and create a virtual schedule for them, where you've got video calls. But the net result that I'm going to recommend is going to seem kind of crazy at first, and the idea is to increase your meetings. So first, take a look at the ones that you're having right now that maybe don't add a lot of value given the current circumstances. All right. So there's probably a lot of meetings that just happen every single week at a certain time, just for a status update, and it involves multiple people that maybe is not the best use of time considering the circumstances. So maybe consider putting all of those things on pause. Maybe taking a smaller portion of those folks that have real status updates and focused agendas and decision making that needs to happen, and maybe create a new schedule for that. But in general, in order to make sure that communication continues to flow and that you've got great relationship with your employees and you're able to continue having productivity at the levels that you would expect, you're going to have to make an effort to actually get together more. And so obviously video is the next best thing to in-person meetings. Audio would be the next best thing to that. After that, I think everything trails off, right? So email and just bouncing back and forth with those things is not going to be an efficient use of time. If you got together every day, for example, and I know it sounds crazy, but if you got together every day with either your team and you did a stand-up meeting or a video chat meeting, even 15 minutes, just to see where everybody's at, what are you working on? What are your priorities right now? What are some of the challenges that you're facing, both personally and professionally? If you're in an agile environment and you're taking on different tasks and you're redistributing work in real time, it's going to be important to know where everybody's at and what's holding them up. And people need to be comfortable to be honest about their personal circumstances. Schools are closing, other people's workplaces are closing, and your spouses are all working together in the same space. There's all kinds of other challenges that are coming up for people on a day-to-day basis. People need to feel comfortable to let you know, hey, look, I'm comfortable completing this task. I thought I could get it done by Friday, but with all the things that are going on, I either need additional help or resources or a little bit more time. And you won't know that unless you have regularly scheduled meetings. If you don't schedule them, in a lot of cases, they're not going to happen because there's all sorts of emergencies and unexpected things that are happening for all of us. And it's easy to lose sight of just keeping a pulse. So I'd recommend every day, checking in with everybody on your team, either as a group if it's small enough or one-on-one. And then as a team on purpose, have a weekly check-in meeting, and keep it to 30 minutes. An hour is a long time to do a video chat like this. So that's part of the reason that we kept this to a half hour, to keep it reasonable. So actually increase the meetings and increase the frequency and the touch points with everybody.
Yeah. So tools, there's tons of tools out there. It's amazing what's available at this point. The key here is, as a consultant, yesterday I had meetings which included Zoom, Skype, GoToMeeting, a WebEx, a Google Hangout, and a FaceTime meeting. That's 6 different platforms, enough to make your head spin off. The key is, inside your company, standardize on what you're going to use for what medium. So if it's a one-on-one chat, What's it going to be? If it's a group thing, is it Zoom or is it WebEx? Just get everybody on board with the right technology. Let your IT team, if you have one, choose what it is and make certain that you get the right number of licenses to make it work for your organization.
All right. So on a personal note, for everybody on the call, you got to set some boundaries for yourself. And if you do this properly and you get comfortable with it, then you can cascade this down to the folks on your team, and it'll help everybody in the long run. But boundaries, I mean, literally physically. So right now, I kid around that I'm working in my kitchen, and it's sort of a makeshift office. I do have another space in the house. As Brian was talking, he's got a couple of options. That we have places that within the house we've designated as a workspace. So right now this kitchen isn't a kitchen, it's not a dining room, this is my office. And from a physical standpoint, if I had other people at home right now, they'd know that this is a workspace, and maybe you need to knock or announce yourself before you come in. And setting up some sort of physical boundary like that really helps you define it helps define the mental space, actually, so that that when I'm here, I'm working. And what does that mean for the rest of the house? Well, you may need to be flexible, or you may have to take shifts on who gets which space in the house to work in versus doing household things. And another way that I'll break it up too is, maybe this is the office from 8 to 12, and it's the office from 1 to 5, but maybe everybody gets together for lunch, and I clear my laptop out of here, and it is a kitchen table for an hour, and that's from 12 to 1. But mentally, you need to have the boundaries set up. Otherwise, you'll go into the kitchen in the morning at 6 a.m., get a cup of coffee, say, oh, there's the laptop. Let me take a look and see what's on there. And the next thing you know, it's 6 o'clock at night, and you don't want that to happen either. From a time-based or temporal standpoint, you want to set some boundaries as far as that goes too. Otherwise, you can really slip into a situation where you're working a lot of hours and it's not necessarily all productive. We put this slide in last week before a lot of public places were shut down. The idea is that we're hearing about in the news, and that we're getting guidance from the government, is that social distancing is the best way to keep everybody safe and healthy right now. So if you haven't already, it's a great idea to let everybody know that you're working from home, and the expectation is this is for your safety, so we want you to be home when you're working. If there's coffee shops open that people can hang out in this week, I don't think it's an option anymore. But when we put this slide in, it was. So we wanted to discourage people from engaging in unhealthy behavior.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that's going to be important is trying to maintain your corporate culture from afar, right? At work, you do a lot of fun things and you can get a little zany and so forth. So as an example, last week I was on a call with a client, and he popped on the call and he looked like he was sitting at the beach. And I thought that was kind of cool. And what I realized was that in Zoom is one of the tools you can change your background. And so he's in San Francisco, so I put the Golden Gate Bridge behind me. And so the idea is, have some fun, let the technology, enable you to do some things that are kind of funny, or play a little joke, and just, make light as much as you can, because everything's so serious these days. If you're having a coffee meeting, have everybody show off their mug and use your, zaniest mug, in the morning, or talk about what you brewed with each other. Make certain that you have some social interaction, some social fun in your conversations. So depending upon your company, if you have an intranet, I would highly recommend that you increase the amount of posts and information there, and use that really as a central clearinghouse, so you don't spam everyone with emails all the time. But if there's information to share, get people to go to the intranet to get it. And what I would solicit are best practices from employees in terms of how they're making work from home work for them. The best tips are going to come from the field and from the people in your organization. So solicit those and have them send them in. It'd be cool to even just have a photo collage of different people's home offices and what that looks like. And if you don't have a weekly newsletter, consider sending one out with best practices and wins. The other is just in terms of leading remote teams and driving accountability. Instead of giving people month-long tasks, give them week-long tasks. Think in terms like agile, run sprints, shorter, quicker things, and bite-sized nuggets in terms of what needs to get done, and crank up the volume on communication. The other thing is, the refrigerator, you may have cleaned it out every Friday at work. At home now, I don't think we want to be emptying the fridge. A little inside HR joke here in terms of we're not going to be cleaning the fridge every Friday.
Yeah. All right, and so in terms of productivity and trust, you already trust your employees and you have a lot to rely on from like a historical standpoint. Okay, you've worked with these folks in many cases for years and you know what they're capable of and you know what their usual level of productivity is. Here's the thing, you can't control everything all of the time. And when we see people on a day-to-day basis, we're comfortable with that. Well, that shouldn't really change just because you're not seeing them. If you're taking these tips into account and you're talking to them every day, and maybe you are seeing them with video chat, I would say use the 80-20 rule. And in this case, I would apply it where if you feel like people are 80% as productive as you normally expect them to be when they're in the office, then I think we're doing a pretty good job considering everything that's going on. It's not about how many hours a day somebody's working, it's whether or not the work's getting done, especially if we're talking about professional positions, most of which are salaried. And it goes back to, once again, if you meet with folks, I say every day, but if you could do it, every couple of days, just continue to have conversations about what they're working on and where they need help or where they think that they're going to run into problems.
Yep. So I would say increase collaboration and teamwork. One of the things you can do is virtual team buildings, right? You can do a kickoff, an icebreaker on a call. You're going to do a call and you're going to go around the horn. Ask everybody, if you could be anywhere on the planet right now in better times, where would you want to be? Favorite vacation spot, something that just kind of injects a little levity, some fun, some humor. At the same time, you can use this as an opportunity to do much more virtual training. Online training courses are a great way to keep people connected and keep people learning and sharpening the sword in terms of while we're away. We offer lots of those workshops, as do other organizations. It's also a time to actually gather and solicit feedback. Online 360 feedback tools and so forth, something that we do a lot of work with. Now may be a great time to invest in that. Then the last thing is start thinking about those pet projects that your organization has always wanted to get to, but hasn't been able to. Now may be a time to redeploy some resources on some of that type of work as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Adam to wrap us up, and then we'll answer some questions.
Yeah, and I see we've already got a couple of questions in the queue. Here's the thing, this is going to be different for everybody, right? And we've only got 30 minutes or so to try to cram a lot of information in front of you. So it is what it is. If you're having challenges implementing this, or you anticipate that you're going to have some difficulty with different employee groups or certain departments, or if you've got a team that has never worked remotely, but they just never have, and you need some assistance, I mean, that's something that we'd be more than happy to help you with. There's also tons of online resources, or if you just want to ping us with a question or follow up after this is over, we'll be happy to try to give you some pointers or point you in the right direction.
Cool. All right. That was speedy, Adam. Good deal. All right. So what we'd like to do is we're going to open it up to questions. And what we're going to do is if you have a question, you can type it into the questions. We got a few. One of the first ones was, will we be able to download the slides? And the answer to that is that we actually have recorded this session with the slides. And so you'll actually be able to download a replay that includes the slides and the audio portion of this as well. Mm-hmm. The second one that I saw was, how do you change your background to other things? So that it may be program specific. If you use Zoom, this is not Zoom that we're using. We're using GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar now. But if you use Zoom, where your camera is, it says virtual backgrounds, and you have the ability. There's some preset ones. You can upload your own pictures as well, and you can have some fun with that. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Is your recorded version of this webinar available to download on YouTube? It is not on YouTube. It will be on groovemanagement.com work from home after this. So we will get it up there later today for download. That looks like what we have so far. If anyone has another question, please feel free to type it. Okay. All right, well, I think, to honor the 30-minute sprint time limit on this, we're going to wrap it up here and say, if you had a question, that you wanted answered, you can either email us at info@groupmanagement.com or give us a call, and we'd be happy to chat offline. We've done this workshop for other companies specifically. We can do a
Sure.
version that is also just on managing people as opposed to for the general audience, or one for general audience. So it's really, yeah, we're here to help, and we'd be happy to talk to you about how we can do this for your organization. So hope everybody is safe out there, and we hope to be in touch and to see you in person at some point in the not so distant future. So take care, and thank you for attending.
Thanks.
Yeah.